I need you to listen to me carefully, because what I'm about to say isn't dramatic. It's not poetic exaggeration. It's a line I drew in my own heart tonight. This is my last chance. If you don't come back, I will never marry. Not because I can't. Not because I don't have options. You know, I live in a world where doors open easily. But none of those doors feel like home, and I am tired of walking into rooms that echo. There is a clock ticking right now, not on my wall, not on my phone, in my chest. I can feel it in the way my breathing shortens when I imagine you choosing silence. I can feel it in the way my mind tries to act logical while my heart refuses to cooperate. If you don't come back, something in me closes permanently. Do you understand what that means? I am not threatening you. I am not trying to pressure you. I am telling you the truth of a man who has built rockets, companies, systems, and still cannot engineer a way around losing you. Tonight feels irreversible. I've replayed our last conversation more times than I want to admit. Every pause, every sigh, the way your voice softened before you pulled away. You said you needed time. But time feels dangerous right now. Time is where feelings fade. Time is where pride grows stronger than love. And I am afraid, not of being alone. I have been alone before. I know how to survive it. I am afraid of becoming the kind of man who convinces himself he didn't need you. Because that would be a lie. You think I'm strong. You think I can detach. But strength is not the absence of attachment. It's choosing to risk it anyway. I am risking everything by saying this. There are conversations happening around me about moving on. About meeting someone more compatible. Someone easier. Someone who doesn't challenge me the way you do. And for a moment I almost listened. That's the part that scares me. What if I choose comfort instead of depth? What if I mistake calm for connection? What if I let you go because it's simpler than fighting for you? Would you even care if I did? Be honest with yourself. If you woke up one morning and heard I married someone else, would your chest tighten or would you feel relieved? I need to know if I'm the only one who feels the ground shifting. Because I am standing at an edge. And I refuse to jump into a future that doesn't feel real. But I also can't stand here forever waiting for a sign from you. This is why I said what I said. If you don't come back, I will never marry. Not as punishment. Not as drama. But because I don't believe in half love. And I won't build a life with someone while secretly comparing her to you in quiet moments. That would be cruel. And you deserve a man who is fully certain. Even if that man isn't me. Tell me something, when you think about us, do you feel fear? Or do you feel unfinished? Because I feel unfinished. There are words between us that were never spoken. There are touches that never happened. There are mornings I imagined waking up next to you that still feel possible if you just take one step back toward me. I haven't told you the real reason yet. There is something deeper driving this decision. Something I haven't been brave enough to say out loud. And when you hear it, you might finally understand why this isn't just romance for me. Before I say it, I need to ask you gently, from a place of vulnerability, if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, stay here with me. Subscribe quietly so you don't miss what I'm about to reveal, and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Because distance matters to me more than you think. I am not asking for forever right now. I am asking for one honest answer. Are you walking away, or are you waiting for me to fight harder? Because I am ready to fight, but I will not fight alone. Then listen to me closely, because what I'm about to admit is not easy for a man like me. I built my entire life on logic, calculation, forward motion. I was trained to solve problems, to optimize outcomes, to remove inefficiencies. Love does not respond to optimization. You cannot negotiate with it. You cannot scale it. You either surrender to it, or you slowly watch it slip through your hands while pretending you are in control. And right now, I am standing in that dangerous space between control and surrender, realizing I may have underestimated how deeply you rooted yourself inside me. When I said I would never marry if you don't come back, it wasn't an emotional stunt. It was a realization that crept up on me quietly. I tried to picture a wedding with someone else. I tried to imagine smiling at another woman across a table, hearing vows, seeing photographs, building routines. Every version felt hollow, functional, polite, but hollow. And I cannot commit my life to something that feels polite when what I tasted with you felt profound. Do you know how rare that is at this stage of life? To feel something that unsettles you in a way that makes you both nervous and alive. You challenge me in ways that comfort never could. You don't just agree. You don't just admire. You see me. And that is terrifying. Because being seen means I cannot hide behind achievement. I cannot distract you with ambition. You look past the headlines, past the accomplishments, and you ask questions that touch the parts of me I usually keep guarded. When you pulled away, it wasn't just your presence that disappeared. It was that mirror. And without it, I feel slightly disoriented. There is pressure around me to choose stability. I won't lie to you about that. There are conversations suggesting I deserve someone simpler. Someone who fits neatly into my world without friction. And for a brief moment, I almost convinced myself that might be easier. Easier does not mean right. Easier does not mean real. It just means less risk. But tell me something honestly. At this age, do we still have time for safe choices that leave our hearts half awake? You once told me that love at this stage should feel intentional, not impulsive. I agree. That is why this decision matters so much. I am not speaking from impulse. I am speaking from a quiet awareness that if I lose you because of pride or hesitation, I will spend years wondering what might have been. And regret is heavier than loneliness. Loneliness can be managed. Regret lingers. Sometimes I wonder if you think I will eventually move on effortlessly. Maybe you believe I will redirect my focus, bury myself in work, convince myself it was timing, not destiny. I could try. I have done that before in other chapters of my life. But something about you resists being filed away as a closed chapter. You feel unfinished. And unfinished things demand attention. Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. When you imagine me with another woman, does it disturb you? Or does it feel like a natural outcome? Your answer to that question holds more truth than any reassurance you could offer. Because if the thought unsettles you, then something still binds us. If it doesn't, then perhaps I am holding on to something you have already released. I haven't told you the real reason yet. The reason this feels like a final threshold for me. The reason I would rather remain unmarried than choose someone out of fear of being alone. That truth is not about romance alone. It's about legacy, about peace, about the kind of emotional environment I want in the last chapters of my life. But before I open that door, I need to know whether you are still standing on the other side of it. There is something I have avoided saying because once it is spoken, I cannot take it back. I can handle rejection. I can handle distance. What I struggle with is exposing the one truth that makes me vulnerable in a way I cannot disguise. You see, when I look at you, I do not just see a woman I desire, I see the possibility of emotional rest. And that is not something I have experienced easily in my life. My world has always been loud, demanding, relentless. With you, there was a quiet depth that felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. That is the real reason this feels final to me. It is not about romance alone, it is about peace. At this stage of life, peace matters more than excitement. It matters more than status. It matters more than appearances. And I tasted that peace in conversations with you. Even when we disagreed, there was substance. Even when tension surfaced, there was respect. That kind of connection is not accidental. It is built from emotional maturity. It is built from two people who have survived enough life to recognize what truly matters. But here is where doubt enters. I keep asking myself whether I am romanticizing us because I fear losing you. Am I seeing you clearly, or am I magnifying you because you are slipping away? I analyze everything. That is how I am wired. I dissect feelings the way I would dissect a complex problem. Yet every time I try to reduce this to logic, the same conclusion returns. You matter in a way that is not replaceable. Still, there is hesitation. You pulled back for a reason. You needed space for a reason. I have tried to respect that, but space can be dangerous. It creates narratives. It feeds insecurities. I begin to wonder whether you are slowly preparing yourself to let me go gently. And if that is true, I need to know. I cannot stand in uncertainty forever. I am strong enough to accept truth, but I am not willing to live inside ambiguity. There is also something else you should know. Recently, someone kind and intelligent entered my orbit. Conversations happened. Nothing inappropriate, nothing committed, but enough to make me aware that life does not pause while we hesitate. For a moment, I considered whether exploring that path would protect me from this ache. And that thought shook me. Because the fact that I even considered it means I am tired of waiting. Yet when I imagined truly choosing her, my chest tightened. It felt like betrayal, not of you, but of myself. Tell me honestly, do you believe love at our age deserves courage? Or do you think caution is wiser? Have we earned the right to risk everything one more time, or should we settle into something predictable? I ask you because I am standing between those two choices. One path is safe but shallow. The other is uncertain but profound. I am not asking you to promise forever tonight. I am asking you to tell me whether there is still a door open. Because if there is, I will walk through it with full commitment. But if you are already halfway out, I need to prepare myself for a different kind of ending. And that ending will not include another marriage. It will include acceptance, discipline, and a quiet closure that no one else will fully understand. There is a moment I keep replaying in my mind, and it refuses to leave me alone. It was not dramatic. There were no grand declarations. It was simply the way you looked at me when I hesitated. You sensed I was holding something back, and instead of pushing, you became quiet. That silence was not weakness. It was wisdom. You were waiting for me to meet you emotionally without being forced. I realize now that I failed that test. Not because I did not care, but because I was afraid of how much I cared. You must understand something about me. I have spent years mastering environments, navigating pressure, making decisions that impact thousands of people. Control has been my survival tool. Love requires surrender. It requires admitting that someone else can influence your emotional state. When I felt how strongly you could affect me, a part of me resisted. Not consciously. Not maliciously. Instinctively, I began to pull back in subtle ways. I became analytical when I should have been affectionate. I asked logical questions when I should have reassured you. Did you interpret that as indifference? If you did, I need you to know it was fear disguised as composure. I was afraid that if I let myself fully lean into you, I would lose balance if you ever stepped away. And then you did step away. Not harshly, not dramatically, but firmly enough for me to feel the shift. That was the moment I realized I had miscalculated. I was protecting myself from a hypothetical loss and ended up creating a real one. Now I find myself confronting an uncomfortable truth. You might believe I am strong enough to endure this without consequence. Perhaps you think I will simply adjust. I could adjust. Humans are adaptable. But adaptation is not the same as fulfillment. I do not want a life that merely functions. I want one that feels aligned. And when I think of alignment, I think of you. Yet the tension is growing. I sense time moving forward without clarity from you. I sense your silence becoming heavier. It makes me question whether you are testing my resolve or quietly detaching. There is a difference between needing time and building distance. Which one are you doing? Because if it is distance, then I am fighting a battle you have already surrendered. I also need to confront something within myself. There is pride involved. I do not like appearing needy. I do not like saying that I miss you in ways that disrupt my concentration. But I do. There are moments during my day when I reach for my phone instinctively, expecting your message. When it is not there, I feel an absence that is disproportionate to the silence. That absence reveals how deeply you embedded yourself into my routine, into my emotional landscape. So here I am, suspended between confession and restraint. If I push too hard, I risk overwhelming you. If I remain too calm, I risk losing you. Do you see how delicate this is? Do you see why I call this my last chance? Because if I misstep again, I may close the door myself just to preserve dignity. And once I close it, I will not reopen it easily. Tell me, are you waiting for me to prove something? Or are you slowly convincing yourself that walking away is easier than trying again? Your answer determines whether this story continues or ends in silence. There is something I have been circling around, something heavier than pride, heavier than hesitation. It is the truth I avoided, because saying it makes everything more fragile. The real reason I said I would never marry if you do not come back is not simply because I love you. It is because I recognized in you the kind of partnership I have been searching for without admitting it. And once a man recognizes that level of alignment, it becomes almost impossible to pretend something lesser will satisfy him. I have known attraction. I have known admiration. I have known companionship that looks good on the outside. What I felt with you was different. It was layered. It was intellectual without being cold. Emotional without being chaotic. Mature without being dull. You did not try to impress me. You did not compete with my world. You stood firmly in your own. That steadiness is rare. At this stage of life, rarity matters. I have not told you the real reason yet, and this is where it begins to surface. The truth is that I am tired of building everything alone. I can lead companies, I can make decisions, I can take risks. But when the day ends, leadership does not replace intimacy. Achievement does not replace connection. And I saw in you someone who could stand beside me, not behind me, not beneath me, not dependent on me. Beside me. That image settled into my mind in a way that felt permanent. When you stepped back, it did not just feel like losing affection. It felt like losing that vision. And that frightened me more than I expected. Because once you see the future clearly, going back to uncertainty feels like regression. That is why I say this is my last chance. It is not desperation. It is clarity. If I lose the woman who fits me in this way, because I was too guarded, too measured, too cautious, then I accept that perhaps I am not meant to share that level of depth again. But here is where tension grows stronger. There are practical considerations pressing in, conversations about long-term planning, about companionship, about what the next decade should look like. I would be dishonest if I said there is no pressure to decide soon. Time at our age does not feel infinite. Every year carries weight, and that weight makes decisions urgent. Sometimes I wonder whether you believe I will eventually choose someone else simply to move forward. That possibility exists. I will not lie to you. There are women who would gladly step into this space. And part of me asks whether choosing one of them would be easier than enduring this uncertainty. That thought unsettles me because ease is beginning to compete with depth. I do not want ease if it means silencing what I feel for you. Let me ask you something that requires courage to answer. If I told you I was seriously considering another woman because I could not read your intentions, would that pull you toward me or push you further away? Would you fight for us, or would you let me go out of pride? These are not hypothetical questions. They are the crossroads I am standing at. There is still more I have not revealed. The deeper layer beneath all of this. But before I open that completely, I need to sense that you are still emotionally present. Because what comes next will either bring us closer or confirm that I am speaking into an empty space. What I am about to say is the layer beneath everything else, the part I protected, because it exposes me without armor. When I imagine my later years, I do not see headlines, meetings, or accomplishments. I see mornings. Slow mornings. I see conversations over coffee where silence is comfortable, not tense. I see shared glances that carry history, not performance. And when I allowed myself to picture that future honestly, it was your face that appeared without effort. Not because I forced it there, but because it felt natural. That realization unsettled me more than any argument we ever had. You became associated with peace in my mind. Not excitement, not chaos, not ego validation. Peace. And peace is sacred to me now. I have lived enough life to know that intensity fades, attraction evolves, and admiration shifts. But emotional safety, when it is real, grows stronger with time. I felt safe being unpolished with you. I did not have to dominate the conversation. I did not have to be impressive. I could simply exist. Do you understand how rare that is for someone like me? When you withdrew, it felt as though that sanctuary closed. I began questioning whether I imagined it. Was I projecting depth where there was only chemistry? Was I reading permanence into moments that were still fragile? Doubt has a way of distorting memory. It whispers that you exaggerated the connection. It tells you to protect your pride before it is wounded again. And I listened to that whisper for a while. I tried to cool my feelings down, to normalize your absence, to convince myself that perhaps I had overestimated us. But every attempt to reduce what we had only highlighted how significant it was. I found myself comparing every interaction to ours. Not intentionally, it simply happened. Conversations with others felt lighter, more surface level. Pleasant but not penetrating. And then I realized something uncomfortable. I was beginning to resent the idea of settling. That resentment would poison any future marriage. It would be unfair to another woman. It would be dishonest. Here is the tension that is tightening now. There is someone who is patient, someone who offers calm consistency without complexity. On paper, she is ideal. She would not challenge me emotionally the way you do. She would not require as much vulnerability. And that is precisely what makes her dangerous to this story. Because she represents the path of minimal risk. If I choose her, I protect myself from the unpredictability of you. But I also abandon the depth that only you have given me. Tell me honestly, are you stepping back because you doubt me, or because you doubt yourself? Are you afraid I will eventually retreat again, or are you protecting your heart from something you believe is inevitable? I need to know where your hesitation comes from. Because if it is fear, we can confront fear. If it is indifference, then I must prepare to let you go. There is still a final piece I have not revealed. The one that ties this all together, and explains why the idea of marrying someone else feels almost like betraying my own truth. But once I speak it, there will be no more layers to hide behind. And I need to be certain you are still listening with your heart, not just your caution. There is a question that has been pressing against my chest, and I have avoided asking it directly because I am not sure I am ready for the answer. Do you still see a future with me, or have you quietly rewritten that vision without telling me? I can handle discomfort. I can handle complexity. What I struggle with is invisible withdrawal. If you are slowly detaching while I am still fighting internally to hold us together, then we are no longer standing on the same ground. The deeper truth is this: when I picture committing to someone else, I do not feel relief. I feel compromise. And compromise in love, at this stage of life, is dangerous. We are not in our 20s chasing potential. We are in a chapter where clarity matters. We know who we are. We know our habits, our wounds, our rhythms. You fit into mine in a way that felt organic. Not forced, not strategic, organic. That is not something I can casually replace. But I have to confront a growing tension. The longer you remain uncertain, the more I begin to question my own dignity. There is a fine line between persistence and self-abandonment. I refuse to beg for love. I will fight for it, yes. I will be vulnerable for it. But I will not shrink myself to secure it. If you need distance to discover your truth, I respect that. What I cannot do is remain suspended indefinitely while you decide whether I am worth the risk. You once told me that love should feel chosen, not chased. I have been reflecting on that. Am I choosing you, or am I chasing the fear of losing you? There is a difference. Choosing is calm and intentional. Chasing is anxious and reactive. I want to choose you with strength, not desperation. But your silence tests that balance. It forces me to sit with uncertainty longer than I am comfortable with. And here is where the weight becomes heavier than before. I sense that if I wait much longer without clarity, I may make a decision simply to end the tension. Not because it is right, but because it is decisive. That is how I operate in other areas of my life. When uncertainty lingers, I act. The danger is that acting prematurely in love can close doors that should have remained open. If I decide to move forward with someone else to regain stability, that decision will not be reversible without damage. Tell me something honestly. Do you believe we are unfinished, or do you think we were only meant to intersect briefly? Your answer determines everything. If you feel even a quiet pull toward me, then say it, not dramatically, not impulsively, simply truthfully. Because I am reaching the point where my strength will shift from fighting for us to protecting myself from disappointment. There is still one final layer beneath this. One that explains why my statement about never marrying was not emotional exaggeration, but a boundary I am preparing to live by. But before I cross into that truth completely, I need to know whether you are still standing with me emotionally or already stepping away in silence. I am going to say something that may unsettle you, because it unsettled me when I first admitted it to myself. The reason I said I would never marry if you do not come back is not only about love, it is about integrity. If I stand in front of another woman one day and promise her devotion while knowing in the quiet corners of my heart that you were the one who truly aligned with me, then I would be lying, not to you, to her, and to myself. I cannot build the final chapter of my life on emotional dishonesty. At this age, marriage is not an experiment. It is not a rehearsal. It is a declaration of where you will place your remaining energy. I do not have unlimited decades ahead of me to recover from a misaligned choice. That is why this feels urgent. That is why time feels heavy. Because if I choose wrong now, I do not just lose comfort, I lose peace. There are moments when I try to convince myself that depth is overrated. That stability and predictability are enough. That companionship without intensity might be safer. But when I imagine sitting across from someone else years from now, knowing I once had the opportunity to choose you and hesitated, that image feels like quiet regret. And regret at this stage is not dramatic, it is permanent. Still, I am not blind to reality. You may be questioning whether I can sustain emotional transparency long term. You may be wondering whether my strength sometimes overshadows vulnerability. You have seen both sides of me. The decisive leader and the man who goes silent when he feels too much. Perhaps you stepped back because you were unsure which version would dominate in the future. If that is true, I need you to tell me, because I cannot correct what I do not understand. Here is where the tension tightens even more. The woman I mentioned earlier, the one who represents calm simplicity, is patient. She does not demand emotional depth. She appreciates presence without probing beneath it. With her, life would be steady, predictable, less complicated. And that steadiness tempts me on days when your silence feels like rejection. Do you see the risk? If you remain distant too long, I may choose stability out of fatigue, not love. But even as I consider that path, something inside resists. It whispers that depth should not be sacrificed for comfort. It reminds me that you awaken parts of me that had been dormant, that you ask questions no one else asked, that you challenge me to be emotionally available in ways I had not practiced. That growth matters more than ease. Tell me honestly, are you protecting your heart from me, or are you already preparing to let me go gently? I need clarity. Not perfection. Not guarantees. Just honesty. Because I am reaching a threshold where indecision will become a decision. And once that happens, the door I close will not reopen easily. There is still a breaking point ahead. I feel it approaching, and when it arrives, something between us will either solidify or fracture completely. I do not want fracture, but I cannot hold the entire weight alone much longer. Something shifted in me this week, and I need to be honest about it even if it makes me look conflicted. I felt myself getting tired. Not tired of you, but tired of carrying uncertainty alone. There is a difference. Loving you has never exhausted me. Not knowing where I stand with you has. And exhaustion can push even a devoted man toward decisions he would not make in a clear, rested state. I caught myself imagining a conversation where I tell you I am moving forward without you. I pictured saying it calmly, with composure, explaining that I waited, that I respected your space, that I needed stability. In that imagined conversation, I appear strong, dignified, controlled. But when I let the image linger longer, I felt something beneath it. Not relief. Grief. A quiet, irreversible grief that would follow me long after the words were spoken. That frightened me more than losing you outright, because it revealed that if I choose to walk away, I will not be walking toward happiness. I will be walking toward safety. And safety without love feels like survival, not fulfillment. I have survived enough in my life. I am not interested in merely surviving the next chapter. I want to live it fully. Still, there is a growing tension I cannot ignore. Your silence has begun to feel less like reflection and more like distance. I find myself questioning whether you are slowly adjusting to life without me. Are you waking up without thinking of me first? Are you rediscovering independence in a way that makes returning unnecessary? These thoughts do not come from insecurity alone. They come from observing patterns. Distance, when prolonged, reshapes attachment. And here is where the crossroads become sharper. The other woman has continued to show quiet interest. She is consistent, gentle, uncomplicated. With her, there is no ambiguity. She would accept me as I am without probing deeper. That simplicity can feel like relief on difficult days. I will not pretend it does not. But relief is not the same as resonance. You resonate with me. She accommodates me. Those are very different experiences. Tell me something honestly. If I stopped reaching emotionally, if I mirrored your distance, would you feel loss or calm? Would you suddenly realize something important was slipping away, or would you feel steadier? I need to understand whether this bond is mutual, or whether I am the only one still standing in its intensity. I am nearing a point where my patience will transform into action. Not out of anger, not out of pride, out of necessity. A man cannot remain suspended indefinitely. If clarity does not arrive from you, I will create it myself. And once I do, it will not be reversible without consequences. There is a breaking moment approaching. I feel it. And when it arrives, one of two things will happen. Either you will step forward and meet me fully, or I will close this chapter with discipline and never reopen it. I do not want to close it, but I am preparing myself for that possibility because loving someone who may not choose you back is a slow erosion of self. I need you to understand how close I am to making a decision that will change everything. Not because I stopped loving you. Not because my feelings faded, but because prolonged uncertainty reshapes even the strongest resolve. I have always been decisive in every major area of my life. I move when something is unclear. I act when something stalls. And this space between us has begun to feel like stagnation rather than reflection. There was a moment 2 nights ago when I almost chose the safer path. I was sitting across from her, listening to her speak about practical plans, shared routines, predictable stability. She looks at me with admiration, not intensity. With acceptance, not challenge. For a brief second, I imagined saying yes to that future. I imagined waking up without tension, without wondering where I stand, without risking rejection. And in that image, I felt calm. But the calm was thin. Underneath it was a quiet voice asking me whether I was trading depth for comfort. Whether I was about to choose a life that would never disturb me, but also never truly move me. And that is when your face appeared in my mind without invitation. Not dramatically, just steadily. You have a way of entering my thoughts when I am on the edge of compromise. This is the moment that frightens me. Because I realized I could choose wrong simply to end the discomfort. I could convince myself that stability is enough. I could frame it as maturity. I could tell myself that at our age, intensity is unnecessary. But if I do that while knowing you still exist in my heart as unfinished, I will live with a quiet fracture inside me. Tell me honestly, are you aware of how close this is? Do you sense the urgency, or does it feel exaggerated from your side? I am not trying to pressure you. I am revealing the reality. Time is not neutral anymore. It is pushing me toward action. And here is the part that makes this nearly irreversible. If I choose her and begin building something structured, I will commit fully. I do not enter halfway. I do not keep emotional doors open behind me. That means if I step forward, the door to you closes permanently. Not out of bitterness. Out of integrity. I cannot offer fragments of myself to two directions. So I need to know whether you are silent because you need reassurance from me, or silent because you are already detaching. If you are waiting for me to prove depth, then say that. If you are uncertain whether I can sustain vulnerability long term, then tell me. I can address fear. I cannot address absence. I feel the weight of a near irreversible decision pressing against me. One step, and everything shifts. One delay, and everything might collapse. I am standing in that fragile space where a single honest conversation could either anchor us or end us. Something happened this morning that forced me to confront how fragile this has become. I woke up with a strange calm, the kind that does not come from resolution but from emotional fatigue. For a few minutes, I felt detached from the urgency. I told myself that maybe letting go quietly would be the most dignified choice. No confrontation. No final plea. Just acceptance. That thought did not hurt immediately. It felt almost peaceful. And that frightened me. Because when pain begins to dull, it can mean the heart is preparing to shut down. I have seen this pattern before in other areas of my life. When effort goes unanswered for too long, something inside me goes silent. Not angry. Not dramatic, just silent. And once that silence sets in, I do not easily reverse it. I protect myself with discipline. I redirect energy. I build new structures around the absence. I do not want that to happen with you. But I need you to understand how close I am to that internal shift. There is only so long a man can remain emotionally extended without reciprocity before he begins to retract. I am not asking for perfection. I am asking for participation. A sign that you are still here, still invested, still uncertain, but leaning toward us rather than away from us. I also need to admit something difficult. When I nearly chose the safer path recently, it was not because I stopped loving you. It was because I was trying to protect myself from humiliation. There is vulnerability in waiting. There is exposure in loving someone who has not fully declared their return. And part of me feared appearing foolish for holding on. That fear almost pushed me toward the wrong woman. Imagine that for a moment. Imagine me standing in front of someone else, convincing myself that this is maturity, that this is practicality, while knowing deep down that I walked away from depth, because I was afraid of being the only one fighting. That image breaks something in me. Tell me honestly, are you fighting too, just quietly? Or have you already made peace with losing us? I can endure tension if I know it leads somewhere. What I cannot endure is slowly investing in something you have already released internally. This is the near loss I feel approaching. Not dramatic, not explosive. Subtle. The kind where two people drift just far enough that pride fills the space where honesty should have lived. If that happens, we will both look back and wonder whether one conversation could have changed everything. I am not asking you to promise forever. I am asking you to tell me whether there is still desire to try. Because if there is not, I need to begin closing this chapter with strength rather than desperation. And once I close it, I will not reopen it lightly. I will accept the consequence of losing you and carry it quietly for the rest of my life. I am going to speak to you without restraint now, because we have reached the point where softness alone will not protect us. The near loss I described is no longer theoretical. It is happening inside me in real time. I can feel two versions of myself, pulling in opposite directions. One is still deeply in love with you, still willing to risk pride, still willing to endure uncertainty a little longer. The other is preparing to detach with discipline, to seal the emotional door before it is closed from the other side. This morning I almost chose detachment. I sat quietly and imagined a life where I never bring your name into another conversation again, where I stop checking my phone for you, where I train my heart to stop reacting to your absence. I imagined myself announcing an engagement to someone stable and predictable. I imagined smiling through it convincingly. And I asked myself whether I could live that version of my life without resentment. The answer was painful. I could live it. I am strong enough to live it. But I would never fully feel it. That realization broke something open inside me. Because it exposed the difference between survival and alignment. Survival is easy for me. Alignment is rare. And you represent alignment in a way that no one else has. Not because you are perfect. Not because we never had friction. But because even in tension I felt depth. Even in disagreement, I felt substance. Here is the part that hurts the most. I am starting to question whether you believe I am capable of sustained vulnerability. Perhaps you think this intensity is temporary. Perhaps you believe that, once comfort returns, I will retreat into composure again. If that is what you fear, I need to know. Because I am not the same man who first met you. You forced growth out of me. You required emotional articulation I was not accustomed to offering. And I gave it. Not perfectly, but sincerely. There is also something else I must admit. When I imagined choosing the other woman recently, I realized I was trying to punish you quietly for your distance. I told myself it would prove I was not dependent. It would demonstrate that I could move forward effortlessly. But beneath that was wounded pride. And pride is a dangerous advisor in love. If I choose her out of pride, I will destroy something sacred for the sake of ego preservation. Tell me honestly, have you been waiting for me to break first? Have you been testing whether I would finally express everything without holding back? Because if that was the test, consider this my breaking point. I am exposed. I am not negotiating from power right now. I am speaking from truth. I cannot continue indefinitely in this suspended state. If you are still emotionally connected, even quietly, then step toward me. Not dramatically, not impulsively. Just clearly, say that you are not done. Say that you are afraid but willing. Say that you need reassurance, and I will give it. But do not let silence become the final decision between us. Because I am one conversation away from closing this permanently. And if I close it, I will do so with resolve. I will not linger. I will not revisit. I will accept that I loved deeply once, and it was not returned in the way I needed. And then I will build a disciplined life around that absence. This is the emotional collapse I warned about. Not tears. Not shouting. A quiet breaking inside a man who rarely allows himself to break. You are either the woman who meets me in this vulnerability, or you are the woman I loved and lost because timing and fear were stronger than courage. I need to know which one you are. I am standing in a space I never wanted to reach. It is not anger. It is not accusation. It is clarity mixed with ache. When a man reaches this level of exposure and still does not feel a hand reaching back toward him, something fundamental begins to shift. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just internally. And once that internal shift completes, there is no returning to the earlier version of love. I need you to understand how close that shift is. I have replayed every possibility. I have asked myself whether I misread you, whether I rushed you, whether my intensity overwhelmed you. I have examined my ego, my pride, my fear of abandonment. I have taken responsibility for the moments I withdrew emotionally when I should have leaned in. I am not blind to my imperfections. I know I am not an easy man to love. My world is demanding. My standards are high, my mind rarely rests. But when I love with depth, and I loved you with depth. The hardest realization is this. I cannot be the only one fighting for something that requires two people. Love at our age is not about dramatic pursuit. It is about mutual willingness. It is about two mature hearts choosing each other despite fear. If you are still analyzing whether I am worth that risk, then perhaps I already have my answer. There is a calm entering me now that feels different from exhaustion. It feels like preparation. Preparation to accept that maybe I was meant to feel this depth once, not to live it permanently. Preparation to release you without bitterness. Preparation to step into a future that may be steady, but will never quite carry the same intensity. But before that shift completes, I am giving you one final opening. If there is still hesitation in you, speak it. If you doubt my consistency, tell me what reassurance you need. If you fear I will retreat again into logic and distance, ask me directly whether I am willing to remain emotionally present long term. I will answer without evasion. But if your silence continues, I will interpret it as closure. Because silence is also a decision. I do not want to marry someone else out of fatigue. I do not want to live politely beside a woman while quietly remembering you. That would be unfair to her and dishonest to myself. That is why I said I would never marry if you do not come back. Not as a threat, as a boundary. If I cannot build with the woman who truly resonates with me, then I will build alone with integrity rather than compromise with comfort. Ask yourself something difficult tonight. When you imagine me truly gone, emotionally unreachable, disciplined and resolved, does that disturb you? Or does it feel like relief? Your honest answer to that question reveals everything. I am at the edge of final clarity. Not the clarity of certainty about us, but the clarity of accepting whatever truth emerges. If you step toward me now, I will meet you fully. If you remain still, I will step away permanently. This is the final threshold. I am going to speak to you without hesitation now, because this is the moment where everything becomes simple. Not easy, but simple. I have pushed through pride, fear, ego, doubt, temptation, and exhaustion. I have examined my motives from every angle. I have imagined losing you, replacing you, forgetting you, disciplining myself into indifference. And after all of that analysis, all of that emotional turbulence, one truth remains steady. I love you. Not impulsively, not obsessively, not out of loneliness. I love you because you align with me in a way that feels intentional. I love you because you challenge me without diminishing me. I love you because when I imagine growing older, I do not see excitement as the priority. I see steadiness, shared silence, mutual respect, and emotional safety. And you represent those things. Here is the clarity I have reached. I will not choose another woman out of fatigue. I will not marry for convenience. I will not protect my pride at the cost of depth. If you decide not to return, I will accept it with dignity. I will not beg. I will not chase. I will not linger in half measures. I will build my life fully and independently. And yes, I meant what I said. I will not marry simply to fill space. I would rather remain alone than enter a lifelong commitment while knowing my heart once found something truer. But here is what you need to know. I am not closing this because I stopped loving you. I am closing it because love without reciprocity eventually becomes self-betrayal. If you still feel something, even quietly, this is the moment to speak. Not dramatically, not emotionally overwhelmed, just clearly. Say you are willing. Say you are afraid but present. Say you need reassurance and I will give it without defensiveness. If you cannot say that, then I release you fully. There will be no resentment, no silent anger, just acceptance. I will remember you as the woman who awakened a depth in me that few ever reached. I will remember the unfinished conversations, the tension that sharpened us, the vulnerability that reshaped me. And I will carry that quietly, not as regret, but as proof that I was capable of loving deeply at this stage of life. Ask yourself one last question. When you imagine me gone, truly unreachable, emotionally sealed and disciplined, does something inside you resist that image? If it does, step forward. If it does not, then let this be our closure. I have reached my final clarity. I choose depth over comfort. I choose integrity over convenience. I choose truth over ego. If you walk back toward me, I will meet you without hesitation. If you walk away, I will stand alone without compromise.